It's Real GM Radio. Matt Moore is here. We're going to talk about which players could be moved next before the Thursday NBA trade deadline. Then we're going to get into our monthly tiers. Let's jump in. It's Real GM Radio. Matt Moore is here. You can find him on the Action Network, the Locked On Podcast Network. You could check out his new old Substack, Hardwood Paroxysm. I guess it's technically brand new because it's never been on Substack before. We are recording this exactly 48 hours before the NBA trade deadline. We're going to get into our monthly tiers in a second. But the smoke is still clearing from this major Luka Doncic, Anthony Davis trade. Both GMs had their press conferences over the last couple of days. I recorded something after the Nico Harrison press conference for Real GM Radio. You've done a lot of talking about this. I've done a lot of talking about this. But did anything stand out to you as interesting from those press conferences? And have those press conferences changed your opinion on the trade, Matt?
I mean, they haven't changed my opinion. It's still absolutely bonkers, insane. I think Luka, his kind of downward demeanor today, he was kind of muted a little bit. Not surprising. I think he's probably trying to deal with a lot of not soul searching, but like this is a pretty big, it's not just a slap in the face, but it's a force to look in the mirror a little bit. And what's like frustrating, I think, if you're a Mavs fan is, yeah, like all the stuff you wanted him to get, he's going to get now because you made him. Like there's an observational bias here that I think is absolutely incredible where it's like, yeah, no, you traded him because he wouldn't do all these things that now because you traded him, he's going to do. And you're going to be the one that suffers for it. Nico Harrison could not bomb the presser any worse. The entire messaging about this has been absolutely categorically insane. And it's funny because there's this kind of notion of like, well, he worked on the Nike side, so he understands like fans. No, he doesn't. Come on. That's a corporation that deals in marketing. Like look at the kind of things that Nike partners with in terms of like with this stylish creator, this designer, this influencer. Are they people you've ever heard of? No. Because they operate in that type of world. Like this to me is a GM that just clearly has zero idea about the relationship between a fan and the player. And look, I've heard things. I talked about this on Locked On NBA today. 2 different people with other teams have told me that they had conversations with people in Dallas, not about a trade, but conversations when they were in Dallas visiting with people that they know on the team. And everyone was complaining about Luka. Everyone across all levels of the organization was fed up and frustrated with him. Those same people are now like, I didn't mean we should trade him because that's categorically insane. But it does sound like the situation was pretty awful. And I don't know how to really parse that other than to say, even like if you reach the conclusion that you're just like, this guy is a loser and he's a pain and he is not worth it. He makes everyone around him miserable and we can win without him. Okay. Let's assume that you're right, even though this is the NBA and that's not really how it works, unfortunately. Like, it's a nice idea, but it's not how it works. Talent wins. Even if you get there, you have to paint this in such a way where Luka's the villain. Because if you paint it that way, like Luka's the sympathetic figure. Wes, have you ever seen anyone get traded to the Los Angeles Lakers and get to play the victim too? Ever in our time watching the NBA?
Such a good point. It's such a good point. You're right. And this is why, like, we're going to get to Jimmy Butler here in a second. But if you think that Pat Riley's being petty and all these things, he is. And that's the point. You have to, even Pat Riley, after letting Dwayne Wade walked away, was the villain. And that really resonated in the Heat organization to the point where they never wanted to be the villain ever again. And the Mavericks are very much the villain here. There's reports now of the season ticket holders they're having major cancellations with season tickets or having to offer refunds. You've got fans protesting outside the arena. This is I don't know if the owner the owner of the Vegas conglomerate, all this stuff, like they're not basketball people. And I do wonder if Nico Harrison was like, well, Luka Doncic, Anthony Davis, and the call to the owner, it's like, they're kind of the same. And if you're not a basketball person, I could understand you being like, yeah, I know Anthony Davis. He's been around forever, super famous. Lakers won a championship. Yeah, he's probably about the same as Luka Doncic. And you want to be more of a defensive team? I get it. Okay, go ahead and trade Anthony Davis, or go ahead and trade Luka Doncic because we're getting Anthony Davis. I have to wonder if the owners are surprised by this, about the cancellations, the loss on the bottom line here. That could ultimately potentially cost Nico Harrison his job. even though it sounds like he had alignment with all of this, and I know there's a million conspiracies out there about why the owners might want to, but I don't need to jump into that kind of stuff. But when you say he bombed the press conference, I couldn't agree with you more. And he said a couple of things here too that that really stood out to me. Number one was that, well, when we give him, we're gonna have to offer him the extension, and then the ball is in his court, and it's like, well, yeah. Okay, so that's how contracts work. You've done them before, you'll do them again.
He signed one,
right? And then the whole idea of, well, we're trying to curate a culture here, and he wasn't against the culture, but you have two different. There's a lot of word salad, GM's political stuff, but it was like you have two kinds of players. You have players who are part of the culture and players who add to the culture, and we think Anthony Davis is somebody who adds to the culture, which to me means like all the things that you were just talking about, Matt, is like, all right, you really didn't like Luka Doncic this much. And the counterpoint to all of this is, yeah, but you still made the finals last year. So how much does that really matter?
I want to push back on that part. I don't want to defend this trade, right? So this is the thing, is like there's individual elements that I want to push back on, but not the idea of like it was a bad trade. Of course it was a bad trade. You traded Luka Doncic. You got 1 first-round pick back. I don't care who you got outside of Giannis or Jokic. Even SGA, I'd be like, you probably need
Matt, they got Max Christie. How many times did Nico? He's like, and we also got guys. We also got Max Christie.
Max Christie, yeah. But I will push back on this. I do not like how we take end results and then a narrative papers over it. And I don't even like the word narrative because we overuse that one. Like a narrative is just a storyline, and a narrative can be true or it can be false. And the connotation is that it's always false, and that's just not the reality. Like there's true narratives, right? But last year there's a false narrative that papers over the finals run. Luka was hurt, struggled, and was not good in the first really series and a half. He was not good versus the Clippers. They won with defense, and the Clippers, awful game plan from Ty Lue. They did not win because of Luka versus the Mavericks. Now, or the Thunder. The Thunder will tell you, like, look, man, Luka was the reason why all this other stuff happened because we had to account for him. And that's definitely true. But the Thunder lost because of the Mavs' interior defense, bad exterior shooting by the Thunder, and PJ Washington going supernova from the exact spot on the floor that he is a 27% career three-point shooter. And over this year, he's still shooting that way from that range. That's why. Now, the conference finals, Luka was why they advanced. Luka was amazing in the conference finals in a great matchup. That's a phenomenal matchup for him. But if we look back at the history of that finals run, the answer is like, did they win because of Luka or did they win because of the defense? They won because of the defense. And that is not a reason to then trade Luka Doncic.
Right.
But I do get frustrated when we talk about like, you want to win. Well, and also like you can win with bad culture. The Miami Heat made a finals in a very similar circumstance. When one person is disruptive and negative towards your culture, but the underlying stuff is good.
I won't take this Max slander.
But again, I just don't know how you get to. I don't know that I could ever trade him. Right. I would just be like, I would have been very confrontational. Because it does seem like from the reporting from Stein, there's all this reporting about them isolating him. And you can go back and kind of follow that pattern of Nico basically decided he doesn't like this dude. And he took away all of his support structure and then isolated it and let him fail. And then used that to justify it without making that known to the rest of, like, again, the political side of this, I think, is what GMs have to learn. And Nico Harrison bombed it. There was a way to sell this to be like, we want him to be there, but he's just not in shape. We have to give him 11 days off in November. But instead, they did both things. They coddled the superstar, but they secretly hated him and set him up to fail. And that combination just means that the fans think that he's the victim. You can't do that. There was a way to do this.
And it was a failure, to your point, of GMing, even leading up to the trade. Before the trade, it was a failure of GMing. Like, this is... Instead of coddling him, how do you create that culture so that Luka becomes a part of it and subscribes to it, right? Instead of having to send him home for 2 weeks to get into shape and all these things. I think an underrated part of all of this too is Dennis Lindsey was a part of this front office for a couple of years before taking the Pistons job this past summer. He was part of the orchestration of these, like the big PJ Washington, Daniel Gafford deals that kind of fueled their run to the finals last year. Certainly Nico, he was part of the Kyrie Irving, but Nico Harrison was kind of the one pulling the trigger on the Kyrie Irving thing, which worked out, and he looks like a genius for. But is this just a case of a broken clock is right once a day, twice a day, whatever the saying is? It is because the Kyrie Irving thing was very risky, and he kind of did get him for nothing. So I don't know, but I'm confused about how much credit to give him for that. But there's a lot of credit for the PJ Washington, Daniel Gafford deals, reshaping the roster, getting the depth, even to finding Derrick Jones Jr., things like that really worked out. Dante Exum last year, but how much of it was Dennis Lindsey? There's a feeling around the league that Dennis Lindsey was a big part of those decision-making processes, and now that he's no longer there, Nico Harrison may be left a little bit to his own devices, maybe kind of floating in the wind here without that Dennis Lindsey, for the record, very experienced executive in the NBA, for those who don't know. Nico Harrison, kind of the opposite of a very experienced, more of a people person, right? To your point, is sort of the idea with him. And it just sort of feels like he's failed on a lot of different categories, up to and including the trade. But there's been so much stuff on the trade. Any takeaways from the Lakers press conference and Luka Doncic? Sweater? Is it okay to wear a sweater in February? Are we okay with that?
I think it's fine.
In LA?
I think it's fine. You know, I guess, I don't know. Maybe it's like, maybe he's like wanting to look bulkier so he can like feed into the machinations. Right. I don't know. I think, look, a lot of this I have a lot of good friends in my life that have worked around the league that have a strong belief that a lot of executives are awful and that all of them are just kind of incompetent and stumble into this. Now, I don't necessarily agree with all that because I know a lot of people that I consider to be very sharp inside the league, but I think this is a really rare case. I mean, I'm trying to think of how strongly I want to put this. I made this point to a Lakers fan friend the other day, which is Rob Pelinka didn't do anything here. Didn't do anything. Like, he doesn't deserve this. This isn't a result of the hard work he's put in. There's nothing in terms of his time with the Lakers that says that he has done that. This is the fruit of all of his labor.
Yeah. And I'm sorry to cut you off, but like that whole like little story he went on about how he approached the trade like Kobe Bryant and Luka Doncic approaching a blitz while they're on the court, and how he just locked in for 4 weeks. I mean, that was cringe. Go ahead, Matt. Sorry.
Don't get me started. So, but I think that the one thing I want to credit him with is this. You can be the smartest person in the room, but if you don't have the relationships, you're not going to be successful. And I think that, honestly, I think Sam Hinkie is like a great example of that. Like, that's a very good example of how that can go awry. Versus if we look at the thing that you want to know what Rob Pelinka did right. He had a 20-year relationship with Nico Harrison where Nico trusted him. Mm-hmm. Now, what this really means is that Nico trusted him to do the absolute dumbest thing imaginable. But that's like the benefit here, because like I've spoken to other people in other organizations, not necessarily at the top, but one of the things that's kind of been discussed is like, look, you know, there's a lot of guys around the league that are very, very, very smart. They know how to manage assets, and they know how to draft, and they know how to manage contracts, and they're very precise, and their top-down business approaches are good, but they're not people you want to do business with. People really get tired of Sam Presti getting credit by all of us wonks, despite not having won a title. But one of the things I will tell you, like, to add on to that, the legend of Sam Presti is, for a guy that hasn't won a title, is this: nobody hates Sam. Nobody's like, I hate dealing with that guy. He's reasonable. He's, for the most part, fair. He's straight up with you. And he's willing to talk to you about like life things and not just try and exploit you. And I think that like really pays off. So like Pelinka's ability to manage these relationships on the level that Nico Harrison operated on at Nike is what got him Luka Doncic. And that's not fair to the other 28 franchises, but welcome to life in the NBA, where the Lakers get all sorts of things that they don't deserve.
That's it, man. And one of the other things that's really stands out to me, at least in the Lakers' approach over the years, and even the way that Rob Pelinka was talking about Luka Doncic today, you know, you've got those reports out there that Dallas was isolating him, firing the people that that Luka liked, having issues with him having his own training staff and specialists and all that stuff. And you heard Rob Pelinka in this press conference, and he went very out of his way to say, Luka comes here with his own team of people, and now they're part of our family and stuff like that. And I think you kind of look across the league, and not every franchise, but a handful of franchises kind of stand for something. They have a mission statement, and the very successful franchise kind of stick to that mission statement as best they can. And the Lakers, their mission statement is, we are star friendly. If you are a superstar, we will be friendly to you. And that's the other thing that kind of stood out to me from that press conference is, they are going out of their way to make sure that Luka knows that they are friendly to him, and that if he wants to be and act like a superstar, then that's the place to be. He could be and act like a superstar with the Lakers. But ramifications of this trade, far and wide, things that we're not even anticipating. It's going to be fascinating to see what happens with this, but we're going to put a pin in this for now. Let's jump into some of the trade talk. Don't want to spend a ton of time on this because it could literally, all this can change by the time we're done even recording here, Matt. But we're going to get to some names, and then we're going to get into our tiers. The big name out there, the Luka Doncic domino fall. Anthony Davis, that's done. De'Aaron Fox traded to San Antonio. The big name still out there is Jimmy Butler and the Miami Heat. And there's a bunch of reporting around Jimmy Butler, a lot of noise around Jimmy Butler. You've got Chris Haynes reporting before we started recording here that Jimmy Butler would essentially now be open to having conversations about other teams that are not the Phoenix Suns about potentially playing there, presumably backing off of his backing off of the information that's been out there about him maybe not wanting to play for Golden State or Memphis or sign long-term there. Feels like Jimmy Butler is starting to recognize this Phoenix Suns thing might not be happening, and I might have to open up my other avenues here. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there was an anticipation from Jimmy's camp and from Phoenix that we operated in a pre-2024 CBA world.
Yeah.
And not just from the CBA, though. There's a perfect storm here of you could get around the CBA and you could get around Bradley Beal's no trade. You can't get around the CBA and Bradley Beal's no trade. That to me is, now I still think that because of my belief in the historical precedent, I still am just Bradley's eventually just going to be fine.
Right.
Okay. I just think that human beings, when you're making this much money, are still just going to be you don't want me. All right. There was a little bit of burbling about the idea of actually the Wizards being willing to take Bradley back if they got assets attached to it. Because it's you send Bradley out for assets, you take Bradley back for assets. He gets to come back, be the all-time franchise leader in points. He gets to be the name for the Wizards. And then he doesn't want to be there because they're not winning, but it's not the worst idea in the world. Given how bad everything else is. But I also then heard last night the Wizards were no. Because that's what I think is happening a lot with the trade rumors. I'm really fascinated always by the flow of information, right? And I'm not at the forefront of it. But what I wind up hearing is oh, hey, they're thinking about doing this. Nope, they just decided that they didn't want to. And the question then is well, were they ever they'll say they were never thinking about it in the first place because it's not advantageous to admit it. But then years later, you go, well, did you talk about that? And you're oh yeah, we had meetings about it for days. So I think that there's I think every team in the league is having the conversation of, hey, what would it take for us to take on Bradley Beal? What would that take on? Because obviously they're both desperate to do this. Miami is to their credit trying to be less desperate. They're trying to be nope, we're going to get what we want no matter what. And if that means that our franchise melts down like Chernobyl, that's what we'll do. And I think the Suns now are facing the other side of this pressure, which is, I don't know how serious this is, but the impression I've been given from a lot of different bits of information is, and again, this is speculative, is that I think KD is basically wants Jimmy Butler, thinks that they can win with him. That it's look, Book and I are good enough. We have enough around us. We need a center for sure, but Nick has been better for us. If we could just replace Bradley with Jimmy, that's enough. And the Suns are we can't move him anywhere. There's nowhere for us to go. And KD's well, if you can't figure it out, then maybe I want to go elsewhere. I think that's probably it because it's a pressure thing, right? It puts pressure on which the Suns have got to be do you not think we're under enough pressure? But that to me is kind of my read here. And that's why I think the Warriors talk has kicked up is look, if you can't get this done and we're just going nowhere, it might be better for me to just go ahead and move on, and you guys can get some stuff back too.
I mean, he's in a similar position as De'Aaron Fox was, right? Where he's eligible for this extension. He's right now going to be a free agent in 2026. And, 18 months from now, he's got a little bit of leverage in this, in other words, right? Just like De'Aaron Fox was able to signal to the rest of the league, hey, I want to go to San Antonio. And the Kings didn't get an awesome deal back, but considering that Fox kind of, called his shot there, I think the Kings could have actually done worse in that trade than what they ultimately ended up getting. So, maybe Kevin Durant can do something similar because he does have a little bit of leverage there, where Bradley Beal also has a leverage. And that's the other thing here is part of me wonders, those picks that Phoenix got from Utah, I think are very purposeful, the way the picks that they got, because they're the exact picks that Miami needs in order to unlock going from one tradable first round pick this summer to 4, right? Because of the Stepien rules and all of that. The 2025, not as important as the 2027 and the 2029 picks that they got back. They're bad picks. They're not as good as their future pick, but they work in the sense that, hey, if we get these to Miami, everything becomes a lot more possible for them. The one thing that the Heat have not shown any willingness to do and are not budging on, reportedly, is, well, we're not going to take on Bradley Beal because we're not going to invest $150+ million in Beal, Hero, and Bam, and then they'll kind of be locked into that roster, which is sort of just a worse version of what we are now. And I do wonder if Bradley Beal, to your point, the human aspect of it, just says like, I don't want to be, I'm not wanted here. Maybe my teammates don't even fully want me here. It kind of feels like I'm holding these guys back. I can go to Miami, where I've always had an interest in playing. Would I waive my no trade clause? Would I remove it from the contract in order to facilitate this deal and get to go play in South Beach? That's the part that I keep wondering, even though Mark Bartelstein has been out here adamant we are not getting rid of it. But if Beal just goes to his agent and says, you know what, dude, get rid of it, I think that might be the one thing that the Heat might be hoping for here, because at that point, even if you try to create cap space in that last year, Beal's at least an expiring without a no trade clause. I'm with you. I know you're shaking your head. I don't see it happening, but I do wonder if that's the thing that would kind of get this thing over the top if none of these other options play out.
I mean, Bradley's got to protect himself. He's been given something that only him and LeBron have, which how did he end up with this? But like, I just think that here's the other thing. You can't be like, I'm going to put you waive the no trade if you have trust. If you're like, okay, I'm in, let's do this. Right. You believe in me. I believe in you. Let's go win some games. I'll waive it as a sign of good faith to you about how much I'm in on this. You can't do that with Miami.
No,
I don't.
And you can't do it after the Luka Doncic deal either, I guess.
I don't think the Heat have done as much damage to their reputation as local media that does not include Locked On Heat have done. I think Locked On Heat's been very responsible, and their hosts are both handsome and insightful. But I do think that the Heat have largely been the victim of kind of a perception problem that isn't related to how they do business. But the one thing that they have messed up on is everybody knows that they're just like, Pat wants Giannis, Luka, Shea, Donovan. He wants a top 10-ish, like a guy you can make an argument as a top 10 player, top 5 preferably, to help them win another title. He wants that guy. That's who he wants.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're Bradley Beal, no amount of like, hey, we're willing to invest in you, we believe we can make, like, no, they're gonna you waive that no trade clause, and the second that they get a better star, you're out the door. And then you're winding up playing, I think you're playing in Minnesota's good. No, all the cold weather teams are good now. You're playing somewhere
unless you get traded for Giannis.
You're
Milwaukee's not any good anymore.
Right. You're in Milwaukee
right
in the winter. And I personally like Milwaukee and enjoy spending time there and think that people should embrace. I think it's a cool town. But still, now you're on a losing franchise in a non-big market, and the end of your career is kind of sad. So you got to protect yourself if you're Bradley Beal.
What's going on with the 76ers? Because they trade Caleb Martin for Quentin Grimes. They get below the first apron. And I think if the Sixers are planning another move here, it kind of feels like this is the move before a move. It could also just be saving $20 million in tax savings, as Bobby Marks astutely pointed out on Twitter, which is, for a team that's not going anywhere, sure. Why not? But do you feel like there's something else going on here? Because you kind of look at the Excel spreadsheet part of this and you're like, okay, below the first apron, they could take back more salary and trades. A couple other things get unlocked here. What do you think's going on in Philly?
There's a number of organizations This is one of the kind of surprising thing. We talk about in NBA circles and on social media, we talk about these things as if one guy's in charge
Mm-hmm.
and everything is him. And that's not how this works. Not just though, sometimes it's like there's one guy at the top and there's a group of people that make a decision. Like I think the Raptors are that way, right? Like Bobby Webster's like very like he does most of the work and Masai comes in and does certain things. But there's also a number of teams where you're like, who's in charge? And if you ask a different person, you get a different question. Now, every indication has been that Daryl's been the one in charge for the last 2 years. And I still think that Daryl is like powerful enough to probably negotiate that. But there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen there. There are more cooks in the kitchen than I thought in Milwaukee. And there are 100,000 cooks in Atlanta, just everyone cooking a different dish. And the reason I bring that up is just like, this is probably a move that they could all agree on. Well, we save money if we don't do anything. If we want to do something, we can. That to me, talking to people in other similar situations to the Sixers is what everybody wants. Is the CBA is so restrictive. You just want the option to make choices because you're so too many teams, Phoenix, Miami, all these teams are in spots where they're just like, we can our pathways are so narrow. You're driving on highways with guardrails that are like closer, almost as close as the width of the car. And so you're just trying to keep the thing from crashing into the side. And to get through, you just want to widen your freeway lane a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think it's probably part of that. Now, do they have machinations in mind in terms of Paul George? I think so. Are they looking at different options? They've gotten calls for Yabusele. Like there are teams that are interested in trading for Gershon Yabusele, which is a phenomenal return on investment given how they got him. Picked him up off of out of
they watched the Olympics. Yeah.
After the Olympics and being able to be like, we've proven he's an NBA player. He could actually start for you, but he could definitely be a bench player. Send us assets and then help that helps you out. But I just think there's so many questions right now about who's making calls, what's the direction of the franchise, who's going where, are they giving up on the Embiid timeline? What do you do? Tyrese is so good. They are stuck between 15 different worlds. So to me, the Occam's razor here is it gives them more options no matter what they want to do. If they can agree on a direction, then they can do that better after making this trade.
I like the deal for Dallas too. I know Quentin Grimes is maybe if you just kind of scan Twitter is like a Hall of Famer. People like NBA Twitter loves Quentin Grimes. It's like the second coming of Scottie Pippen. They treat him like he's a good player. I like Quentin Grimes just fine. He's a little injury prone. There's streaky as a shooter. Caleb Martin's streaky as a shooter, but he's also a playoff bona fide guy. He's got experience, and if you want to kind of upgrade that move, and if you're Nico Harris and you say, hey, we can win now, Caleb Martin is a guy who helps you win now a little bit more than Quentin Grimes does. So I get it from their side. And then the focus group part of it from the Sixers, I understand that. Like it totally makes some sense. The other thing is the Lakers. They're out here looking for a center. Another part from Rob Pelinka's press conference basically just said, we're looking for a versatile, mobile, vertical threat. And then Sam Amick reports that they're looking at Steven Adams. So those things not quite adding up. I'm joking because obviously, if that guy who was mobile, versatile, vertical threat was out there, I'm sure the Lakers would get that. I think they're probably it's a beggars can't be choosers type of situation. Adams on an expiring deal makes some sense for them. Maybe he's gettable. I don't know. But what do you think about the Lakers? Who's like the center that makes sense? Like if you could just, I don't know. I don't want to say pick your dream center because they just got their dream Luka, but just like a prototype of a center, a guy. What do you think makes sense for them?
I think you can complete the build in a number of ways. I hear that they've cooled on JV. They're no longer like a Valanciunas team.
Makes less sense for them now. Yeah.
Vooch is hard to do with the money, but I do think that there's probably like a little bit of value there in terms of you can play spread 5 out. Mm-hmm. Now, I just don't know how you get a team with Luka Doncic and Vooch and 40-year-old LeBron to be competent defensively. Vooch has been part of top 5 defenses. You can play drop with him, but you got to have great guards to do that. You have to have really good guards to contain, and they don't have that, and wings that can do it, and they don't have either. So for me, it's like, all right, if you're not going to go for stretch 5, got to play drop, do you want to go switch? And the name that I come to is Nick Claxton.
Same. Yep.
Is you get to a hyper versatile switch all 5 who can rim run, help you on those kind of instances. Are you going to have rebounding problems? Sure. Like it's going to be a little bit of an issue. Luka's a great rebounder. You can figure out a power forward replacement. There's enough of those guys. You can figure that out. That to me is like a pretty good model. Is like, all right, we're gonna play Nick Claxton up and down, high spread. Like we're just gonna play Luka high spread pick and roll with LeBron as secondary playmaker. You're building something. I think that instance I think makes a lot of sense. The guy I believe that I've heard consistently for 2 months that they want is Robert Williams. And Portland is just being one executive that has had talks with them has termed it as insanely frustrating that Portland will not commit to who or what they will move or who or what they will move pieces for. Ayton, Robert Williams, Denny Avdia, Anthony Simons, they just won't commit to any sort of like real substantive talk. And that's pissed everybody off as far as like, I'm not expecting them to say yes. I just would like to get something on paper so that we have an idea of what our options are with them. And we just can't figure it out. They're too vague about everything. So I do think that Williams makes a lot of sense. Claxton makes a lot of sense. There's not an offensive weapon I think that makes sense right now. I can't see one in the league where I'm like, this center is the combo that completes him unless it's Jokic, which at the risk of anything can happen, as we've seen, I feel confident the Nuggets are not going to trade Nikola Jokic. So, yeah, I don't think that there's really an option, but look, I think they'll keep an eye on everything. The other one that I would probably look at, if you're going to look for the absolute perfect combo, probably Bam Adebayo is a name I would probably. I'm not trying to troll you here. I'm serious. If things go sideways with Miami, I do wonder if like that's a name that they try and lure because
yeah, I mean you do
that he can compensate for all the problems you have defensively with Luka.
No question. And put Vanderbilt, Gabe Vincent together. It's how does Miami say no to that? If Gabe Vincent comes home. I'm kidding. But look, Steven Adams, obviously not the perfect fit, makes sense, expiring cheap-ish, $12-ish million, if that's just sort of the Band-Aid solution in the meantime. I think if they get just a guy like Clint Capella is another one that's out there, a little bit harder to get to that salary. And Capella's not close to what he used to be, but again, it's just there's a gaping hole there. And if you could just get a Band-Aid solution for the next, this half of the season and then figure it out in the offseason, probably the best case scenario, unless they're able to get a guy like Claxton or something like that between now and Thursday, which obviously they'll do that. The other guy out there is Miles Turner. He's potentially he is a free agent this offseason. Is that a guy that they look at and want to maintain some flexibility for? Probably. Yeah. It doesn't sound like he's gettable before the deadline unless you're hearing something different.
So here's one of the things that you'll hear pretty consistently is the local guys hear one thing and then the national guys hear another. And my favorite of this at all times is a good friend of mine, Tony Jones, where the Jazz were like, we are not trading Donovan Mitchell. Under no circumstances are we trading Donovan Mitchell. The Jazz have traded Donovan Mitchell. Like they just always tell the local guys they're not going to trade anybody because they don't want it impacting the locker room, because sometimes those are guys that the families of the players pay more attention to the local guys. I say that because of this. Everyone else is kind of like, yeah, now I'm hearing like Lakers Miles Turner. And then whenever I check in on things that are a little bit closer to Indiana, the sense I get is the Pacers are trying to clear Toppin, Nesmith, and pieces to make room to re-sign Miles. Which is it? And it might be both, right? Again, right. You talk about optionality where it's like the Pacers are trying to make room to keep him, but if they get to the deadline and they're just like, we can't get a good return for Nesmith and Toppin and whoever else, like we have to send out too much in draft capital of good players to make the cap room, then you have to trade Turner because you have to get return on investment. That's a tough spot for a team in a small market. So I'm not going to rule out Turner's perfect. Like he's absolutely perfect for the Lakers. If they get him, it's another home run. And again, the arc of the NBA universe bends towards the Lakers, no matter how incompetent they are. But I will just say that like, I don't think the Pacers' preferred strategy is to trade Miles Turner to the Lakers.
Last thing here, I got before we get to our tiers, I got 3 names. We don't have time for all of them, so just give me the one that you want to talk about or you find most interesting. Brandon Ingram, Lonzo Ball, and the Milwaukee Bucks, because they've been in the news. Is there a Chris Middleton, Kyle Kuzma swap that's been discussed and all that kind of stuff? Kind of interesting, kind of weird. Ingram, Ball, Bucks, take me where you want to go.
Ingram, I have zero interest in because who knows what the Pelicans are going to do, and ultimately
we've been talking about him for a year.
And he's not a player that's going to. I'm sorry, he's just not a player. No one's trading for Brandon Ingram, and I'm being like, they could win the title. No one. There is no one they can trade for that I'm like, they can win the title if they trade for Brandon Ingram. Like the Orlando Magic needs scoring more than any team in the NBA. If they traded for Brandon Ingram, I'd be like, okay, let's cross the Magic out. I'm not trying to like, it's not a personal thing against Brandon. Like he is very good at what he does. He is the real hooper. He is DeMar's successor as a real hooper, but I just cannot see him being the difference maker for any team. Lonzo, it's interesting that Stein reported today that they're considering keeping him. I think that's mostly because that to me is posturing, because I think that last I heard was the best they can get is second rounders. Everybody's just too scared of the injury history. And I think that that's wrong. And I think that team should offer their first rounder for him, but it doesn't sound like any team is willing to take on the injury risk. So let's talk about the most interesting one, which to me is the Bucks. My understanding is that there were conversations with the Bucks, with Phoenix, Chicago, and the Heat. And as much as I think that the Jimmy Butler talk might be a red herring in terms of the Bucks are more interested in adding somebody else to help get a Butler deal done. That to me makes more sense than adding Jimmy Butler. Maybe I'm wrong and he winds up a buck. It can entirely happen. What I do think is that I do think the Bucks are in a similar position as they have been in twice before, which is not getting it done. Giannis could be gone. Teams are circling. Bam, trade for Jrue Holiday. Okay, won a title. Awesome. Things are great in Bucksland. Things are starting to flag. Haven't made the conference finals. Giannis is getting a little frustrated. What's he gonna do? Damian Lillard. So this is their pattern, is like, and to their credit, they have been like, whatever we will do to keep Giannis, we will do whatever it takes. And so I think that they're right now trying to use Chris Middleton, Brooke Lopez, Pat Connaughton, Bobby Portis, and whatever other assets they can tack on to try and find a way to substantially upgrade the roster. I do not think the Bucks are looking. I think the Bucks are looking at minor moves, because you have to look at minor moves, and they might do one. But I think their focus is more on, can we parlay everything? Can we get involved where we're the beneficiary of adding that other guy? Can we be that team? And I don't know what that looks like, but I do think that the more teams get outside the box in the next 24 hours, 48 hours, that I do think the Bucks will continue to be a team that is like, hey, we've got good players on reasonable contracts that you can either use as expirings or just veterans. We have guys that can help you if you can, but we want to get at this level of return for it.
Yeah, when I saw the Kuzma thing, my first reaction was like, what? No, don't do that. And then I thought about it and I was like, I don't hate it. You know, Chris Middleton, I love Chris Middleton, man, but he's kind of a zero right now. I don't know if that's too harsh, but like you just can't expect. Every once in a while he comes off the bench and scores like 20 points and you're like, oh, cool, like Chris Middleton. But you can't count on it on a night-to-night basis going into each game. And then for me, that's a non-starter if you're a team with finals aspirations the way that the Milwaukee Bucks are. And Kuzma's having a terrible year. We know he's better than this. And so if you're the Milwaukee, maybe you're betting on, well, we get Kuzma here. We play him next between Brooke Lopez and Giannis. And maybe he's not playing for the Wizards, who aren't playing for anything right now. Maybe we get a better Kyle Kuzma. This is a guy who's won a championship or been part of a championship-winning team. So I don't hate it. I don't love it. I don't hate it. But that kind of feels like the right kind of move. When you're talking about minor moves, that kind of feels like the right move as opposed to big swing for Jimmy Butler. Because there's so much risk inherent in that, where maybe there's a big swing for somebody else, but that's a little bit less temperamental and risky. But the Jimmy Butler thing always never really passed the sniff test for me. Although, desperate teams act desperately sometimes. So maybe that's what it is.
Except for the Heat. Antoine Jameson is the name that I will throw out there, where the Cavaliers in 2010 were like,
I was like, now, dude, in 2025?
One piece away. A little bit up there. Where he's on the Bucks timeline, at least, where the Cavaliers in 2010 were thought to be one piece away, and they traded for Antoine Jameson. That was like the piece to get them over the top, and it was not. That is what Kyle Kuzma feels like to me. The other thing, I was talking to somebody about this last night, where I was like, well, look, PJ Washington was in Charlotte and nobody thought like anything of him, and then he goes and he's a huge part of the Mavericks' success. Daniel Gafford was a pushover center for one of the worst defenses in the league, and he's a guy that helped the Mavericks make the finals. And the person noted to me, they're like, they were always in those positions. They had never known winning, and so they were thirsty to contribute to a winning environment. And he said, Kuzma's the opposite. He won somewhere, thought he was a big part of that success. Now he's been spending 2 years doing nothing and just getting in cardio for the Wizards. Sometimes those guys can't ever get back to a winning mentality. So I think that is like a concern here that I don't know that, like, I would advise very strongly. I think the idea of the Bucks using Kyle Kuzma, because there's a lot of teams that like him, including, by the way, the Dallas Mavericks, who tried to get him and then wound up with PJ Washington instead and Gafford. But I think there's a number of teams that like Kuzma. But if I were the Bucks, I would still be like, anytime that you're in these conversations, try and find a great player that somebody's like, yeah, we'd be willing to part with them, and be like, okay, we can get you this from all these different types of pieces because Phoenix and Miami are so desperate to solve their problem, and we have contracts to help that out. So that to me is like the best Bucks approach for them going into the next 48 hours.
All right, let's jump into tiers. What do you have?
All right. So this is for how we're going to win. How likely are they to win a title in the next 3 years? So not just this year, for the next 3 years.
So one title, they have to win one title within the next 3 years.
Yes.
Okay.
We're going to do it with tier 1. Okay. Which is, I expect them to be conference finals teams next 3 years.
Okay. Thunder. I like how you're breaking this out. I like this. Okay, let's do it.
Top tier is 4 teams. Thunder, Celtics, Rockets, and Cavaliers.
One time within the next 3 years, you fully expect these teams to make the conference finals one time in the next 3 years. That's essentially what you're laying out right now.
That they have, I would say the better way to do it probabilistically is like they have a better than 50% chance to make multiple conference finals in the next 3 years.
So we got Boston, OKC, Houston. What was the other one?
Cavaliers.
I'm trying to think if you've left anybody out. And I can't say that you did. I think I feel pretty good about that. No notes on OKC, Cavs, Celtics, obviously. I love the Houston Rockets take. Why are we putting Houston in the same class as those other 3 teams?
Ime Udoka. To me, it's like you've laid a foundation, and they have so many options, right? San Antonio has narrowed their options by doing the Fox trade. They've shipped out 3 first-round picks. So you just use some equity to get Fox. And Fox is a really great player and fits well with Wembanyama, but I don't necessarily see him as like instant. You're in the title picture. Nobody does, right? He's part of the process of growing around Wemby. But Houston, like Amen Thompson had a 25-point triple-double on the road in MSG last night in a battle to the wire with Jalen Brunson. That dude is made for it. Alperen Şengün is an all-star. There's so much you can do with him. He can be the 3rd best player on a title team. He could be the 4th best player on the title team. I don't know if he could be the 2nd. Maybe he could be the 2nd best player on a title team, depending on how good Amen gets. You have Jabari Smith. You still have Reed Shepherd, who has been toiling away in the G League, still a really good player. Cam Whitmore. You have all these guys. The teams are going to be like, yeah, we'd love to have him. And they've just been able to keep them and keep their value growing because none of these guys are getting worse. Jalen Green's rehabbed his value. That Jalen Green contract is worth so much more than it was at the beginning of the year because he's shown he can have big moments in big games and be the best player on the floor for the number 2 seed in the Western Conference on some nights. Now, they don't have the guy he's the best player on the court for them every night, and he's definitely not the best player on the court for either team on every night, but they have the pieces to go get them. And they have done I'm just so amused and in awe of, we're going to pick one team who has over leveraged themselves in the Phoenix Suns, and we're going to corner the market on shorting them. And we're going to squeeze them on a short so hard that they're going to have to give us what we want. That is an incredible gambit. And it's an incredible kind of way to go about this, which is another reason why, like, if I was Atlanta, I would have been banging down the door of the Sacramento Kings and been like, we'll give you Trae Young. All we want is you just convince San Antonio to give us our picks back. Just please, 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 please. Because there is a very good chance that the Spurs are going to be able to use, hey, we own Atlanta's future with some team that's going to be like, if we can get Atlanta's future, we'll give you this really good player. So getting back to the Rockets, like with Ime, the structure, the defense, and Amen, and how much I believe in Amen Thompson, and like they can trade Jabari Smith Jr., Cam Whitmore, and Phoenix picks to go get a guy. Like there's just so many options for them to get there. One of their guys might make the leap and be that guy anyway, or they can go get the guy, or they can have 2 guys. There's so many options there for them, and that's why I think the Houston Rockets, already in the top 3 in the Western Conference, have to be at the top here.
Yeah, I mean, you're betting on Houston more than you're betting on Cleveland, Boston, or Oklahoma City because those guys proven conference title type of conference finalist type of teams already. They're built already for that. Houston's not quite there. Maybe they can make a surprise run this season, but to your point, they're not there, but they have all the options to get there, and they could do it pretty quickly. The Amen Thompson piece of this, to me, he could be that guy. He could very well end up being that guy. He has this otherworld athleticism. I swear to God, Matt, the other day he had like this lefty layup. It looked like he was floating horizontal to the court. I'm not even sure what exactly was happening. It wasn't the Boston game. It was a couple games after that. I'm just like, what even is this? What am I watching? He took a guy off the dribble yesterday, got him backpedaling. It was like the guy's never seen that speed before. It was like you unlocked something in a video game, and he was like, I didn't even know you were allowed to go this fast in Mario Kart. This is crazy. And then you combine that with the Ime Udoka stuff. There's so much on what the Rockets can't do, which is score in the half court. I think we forget what they can do and what they are doing. And the answer to that is everything else at an elite level. They're an amazing offensive rebounding team. They get a ton of second chance points. They limit all of that stuff. They're amazing in transition, defensively and offensively in transition. Amazing on both ends. Like, they do everything else well. They're dialed in. Udoka's got Jalen Green trying hard on defense. It's why Jalen Green is in a lot in on these games at the end of these games a lot of times. The one concern I have with Houston is I'm still not sure. And I've noticed it over the last couple of games, specifically after the Amen Thompson Boston blow up there. Does Jalen Green still think he's the guy there? And there's a little bit of a, hey, it's my turn thing going on with him. And I don't know if that's just a symptom of a young team, but it's something that it is. It is a symptom of a young team. But it is, I don't know if it's something that you can get over or if it's something that has to happen at the roster construction move. It's just something I'm watching.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think he definitely thinks he's the guy.
Yeah.
He's been told he's the guy his entire life. There have been games where he's been the guy. And I think the problem is just like Amen's going to let him. Like he just is. And how he responds to that is going to be interesting.
It reminds me a little bit of like Giannis and Middleton early in the careers, right? Where Middleton was like, oh no, this guy's the guy. And then he just basically took that step back and let him go.
Chris got it always, though. Like, you have to remember that Chris is a second-round pick that worked his way up from nothing. It's one of the reasons I respect Ned so much. But to me, it's more of Jamal Murray, not to overlean on my own experience, but Jamal was brought in to be like the guy. Jamal was going to be the guy. And then he was like, it was, hey, you're going to have to earn your minutes from Jameer Nelson. And Jameer was better than him every year.
Mm-hmm.
And so they traded Jameer just to force Malone to play him. So they gave him the spot. But by the time that they did that, Jokic had emerged. And so then it became like Jamal had to reconfigure his entire career to be like, no, I'm not Steph Curry. I'm the partner of Nikola Jokic.
Right.
And he did that to his credit. And they won a title because of it. I also don't know how, like, what about Jalen's game, though, where Jamal can make Joker better with a two-man game? How does Jalen Green make Amen Thompson better? How does Jalen Green make Jabari Smith Jr. better? He doesn't. How does Jalen Green make Alperen Sengun better? He doesn't. Those guys make him better, but he doesn't make them better. And I think eventually Houston's going to reach a point where they're like, we can let this guy go because we know that whoever we bring in can probably make the other guys better and they make him better too. But some other team is going to be like, hey, this guy gets his own. That's pretty decent. Like,
right.
What feels inevitable is the Booker trade, and probably won't be because the inevitable things don't happen. Luka Doncic to the Lakers happens. But like, if we take that road, if you're Phoenix and you're up against it and you're just like, nope, we're out of outs. Like, we are at the river and we are out of outs. Straight draw didn't get home. Flush draw didn't get home. We're screwed. We got to fold here. And you're looking at your options and it's like, hey, I'll split the pot with you at, 30-70. Jalen Green makes it a little bit more palatable. All right, Jalen Green's the new guy. We're going to build around him, right? Yep. You can get there. So I do think that they should be probably a little bit more like this summer is when I think they should look to move him after that. But the biggest thing for Houston, this is going to be their hardest thing. Don't get overly attached to your success. The best thing for Houston would be for them to lose in the first round because then it's like, okay, we're really good, but we're not great. How do we get great? And that to me is like what they're going to do now.
Give me your next tier.
All right. The next tier down is, this could happen, but some stuff is going to have to go right for them. The window there is there for sure, but it's not likely. They are not probable to do this, but it's possible. I do think all these teams, by the way, will make one conference finals over the next 3 years.
Okay.
And it's just 3 teams: the Nuggets, the Lakers, and the Bucks. The Nuggets have Nikola Jokic, the best player in the world. The Los Angeles Lakers have Luka Doncic, the second best player in the world. And the Milwaukee Bucks have Giannis Antetokounmpo, who is either third or fourth best player in the world. And as long as the Bucks have that, and the Bucks, again, they've got a lot of things that they can do here with Brooks' contract coming up, with Mid's contract coming up, with Portis's contract and Connaughton, and to be perfectly honest, Dame. They have a lot of options here. If they can avoid complete disaster and losing Giannis Antetokounmpo with a trade demand, then I think the Bucks can absolutely, like, I think the Bucks are live to win the title this year. They match up better than I thought they did at the start of the year with a lot of these matchups. The Nuggets seem very far away right now. It's not like I'm not going to feel good about the Nuggets in most of their series, but I have returned to this, which is in the Western Conference. Do you want, especially with Luka gone to the Lakers now, do you want Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Mark Daigneault or Jokic and Malone? I want Jokic and Malone as much as I think Dags is insanely good and Shai's amazing. They're both, that's a very high level. That's close. Do you want Amen Thompson and Ime Udoka or Jokic and Malone? And you can make this into just like, do you want Jokic? I get it. The coach matters to me for solving problems because coaches can get in the way.
Right.
So when you go down it, so I think the Nuggets are definitely in that tier. The Lakers, not this year. So it's like the next 3 years. Well, I'm already down to the next 2. I just don't know how you fail with the Lakers' star power, attractive gravity as a destination because of the weather and nightlife and Luka. Next 2 years, they'll make a conference finals for sure.
I think the Lakers within 18 months are a title contender, right? As long as they make the right moves on the, find a center, all that stuff. You've got Luka, to your point. Anything's you've got Luka Doncic and LeBron James, and who's still a very good player and an excellent problem solver, especially in the playoffs. You've got those guys. The Giannis and Jokic points are good ones. The one team, and they're probably in your next tier. How soon is Victor Wembanyama considered Jokic, Luka, Shai, Giannis level? You've got some people saying that it could be by the end of this season. I think that's probably a little too fast. But within the next 3 years, that feels like almost certain that he will be at that spot of, you got this guy, you got a chance at least making one of these. I guess so the question would be, how fast is he part of that group? And is it in the next 3 years?
Eye test doesn't match impact metrics for me. It's not that I don't watch Wembanyama and go, what? Like, you do that 7 times a game. But you can bump him off of his spot. He is out of position. He can get caught. In a playoff environment, he's probably going to pick up some foul trouble because of those tendencies. The game is so much faster in the playoffs. It's funny because it's slower because of possessions, but the decisions are so much faster because everyone's going so at full speed. So I think he can get muscled. There's all these kind of ways where I'm like, there's matchup problems that he's going to have in the playoffs. So I think it's a little bit further off. He is in the next tier because the Spurs, like, in 2 years, do I expect the Spurs to be in that conversation? 100%, right? Like, I expect the Spurs to be in that conversation, but I don't know if this year and next year I can really think the Spurs can make a conference finals and put them in line for a finals appearance.
So I'm with you there. So it would have to be in this 3rd year, right? Because it's not going to happen this year. It's not going to happen next year, probably. The one thing with San Antonio too is, they traded 3 firsts to get De'Aaron Fox. They still have a ton of firsts that they could trade. And they still have Devin Vassell. They still have, a big chunky Keldon Johnson contract. They still have contracts that they can move. Interesting young players, a Malachi Branham or the Sohan or something like that over there. Harrison Barnes's contract is chunky enough. Like, they could get up to pretty easily. They're live to make another big move here. And part of me wonders if they do. And do they just treat Victor Wembanyama like the rookie contract quarterback and say, well, this guy's a top 10 player right now. Let's just build it around him. You could argue that Victor Wembanyama has the best contract in the league, making $12 million right now. So let's just go ahead and build around him before we have to give this guy the super duper max. And part of that is De'Aaron Fox. Maybe there's a third thing here, or a second, that is, let's just go get this super duper star. We can afford to overpay him because we're underpaying Victor Wembanyama by so much. And as long as we're not on the hook for that guy when Wembanyama's next contract kicks in, maybe we can make a little run at this now. I think maybe that doesn't tend to be how San Antonio acts, but they've also never had something quite like Victor Wembanyama in a second apron world, where capitalizing on these rookie contracts could be maybe like the next trend we start seeing. Not that you're going to see a bunch of Victor Wembanyamas running around, but if you have a player could be a meaningful part of a championship core on a rookie contract, maybe you do load up for a couple of years and just see what happens. So I don't know. I'm tempted to put the Spurs in this tier, maybe if your tier list wasn't the next 3 years, maybe it was like the next 4 years, I'd feel a lot more comfortable about moving them into tier 2. But you said you have them in tier 3, so give me your tier 3.
Well, not only that, I want to make one more point.
Sure.
A key with the teams that are in this next tier are, yeah, you can make a finals. Are you going to win it?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, like, I think the Spurs could shoot the gap and make a finals, but I don't think that they're going to win. And that to me is like, that is a thing you have to consider here. You can do the super duper 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 star trade and you can make a finals. Do you win?
Mm-hmm.
You want to be able to say that when you get to the finals, you're a favorite.
That's why, like, it would have to be Shaquille O'Neal playing with Dwayne Wade. It would have to be that. And I'm not sure what that is, but nobody was sure that Luka Doncic was going to. So who knows? But
all right. So tier 3 is the Knicks, the Grizzlies, the Warriors, and the San Antonio Spurs. So 3 of these teams are kind of similar. Where, like, I think the Knicks can make the finals. I think they'll lose, but I think they can make the finals. I think the Grizzlies can make the finals. I think they'll lose, but I think they can make the finals. The Spurs, I think in 3 years, yes, they can make a finals. I think right now they probably would lose. But maybe in 3 years they can actually win the title. The Grizzlies, I think in 3 years could win the title if they get the right sequence of events to go on. The Knicks, I don't know if I believe that. The Warriors are the outlier here amongst this group because this Warriors team is entirely the only reason that this is here is Giannis. That's the only reason I have Golden State there is instead of Kevin Durant and LeBron James and the Clyde Drexler, Charles Barkley, Hakeem Olajuwon Rockets remix of old guys trying to put it together too late in their careers. If Golden State, if the Bucks miss, if they can't pull off the trade to get the help that they need, if they don't make a conference finals run this year, if Giannis does lose faith and is just like, look, man, we won the title. I've given you all these years. I've done my part. I want something different. And there's always been that thing in the background of Golden State. There's mutual, right? That's the one that there hasn't been like Giannis wants to be a Laker eventually. There's been like Giannis wants to play with Steph. Now that's borderline where Giannis is going to be over 30 and Giannis is over 30 and Steph's 35 and the window's closing here. But if you told me that next year you've got Steph Curry and Giannis Antetokounmpo and whatever they've got left, I think you have to put them in the title conversation. And so that to me is why Golden State exists here, is entirely because of the possibility of that, because they have positioned themselves to be like Jonathan Kuminga. And we didn't give away all our picks. And I guess if you want Brandon Pajemski and Trace Jackson Davis. And we have Draymond's contract, which will eventually go away, but you'll talk yourself into him being a positive culture change, even though he'll probably be terrible for you. Like, there's enough there to make the argument for it. So that's why I have Golden State here.
I agree with you on the noise between Giannis and Golden State. It's been there for a very long time. It was there even when I was covering the Warriors years ago. But I cannot sign off on them being in this tier with the Spurs, the Knicks, and the Grizzlies because it's such a hypothetical. It really is. Like, the chances of them completely butchering this, cratering, never getting Giannis or the player that puts them over the top feels more like than a likelihood than them getting Giannis.
Yeah.
And I'm not ruling out Giannis at all. I can't, like,
I think a lot of it. I think a lot of this is if you think of alternatives. Let's say that Giannis isn't it.
Okay.
But let's say there's something unforeseen, because this week proves that nothing unforeseen, like there's nothing that you can rule out. Like, we just can't anymore. That's congratulations to Nico Harrison for eliminating our ability to say that can never happen.
It's true.
Forever. Is there a sequence where the Warriors get enough? Is Steph's the thing you have to get to is Steph still good enough to be 1A, 1B on the title team?
I think he is now.
Yeah, and it's like it's getting narrow. I get what you're saying. Right. Next 3 years, like when Steph's 38, do you really think that? It's getting real narrow. And so the good way to think of this is we did 3 years. The Grizzlies' window is so much wider over 3 years than the Warriors. But the Warriors' window for a major shoot the moon shot the next 2 years is probably higher than Memphis's.
So we've seen the report. Like, we know, okay, they called about LeBron. They wanted Paul George and Lauri Markkanen. The Giannis noise. What is all right? Well, it doesn't. I don't think LeBron's ever leaving LA. Lauri and Paul George, like, kind of dodged a bullet there with both of those guys a little bit. And And the Giannis thing would be awesome for them. But if not the Giannis, to your point, the alternatives, it's like, then what? Is this an Embiid team? Is that a good thing? Is like I'm trying to figure out what the next thing is. So give me your fourth tier when you might be able to continue the Warriors conversation, because maybe they belong in that next tier to me. I don't know.
So the next tier for me is, no, you can do this, but you're gonna have to get crazy inventive. There's a big drop off here for me. This is, you have got to get outside the box and gun. You have to let go of your inhibitions, and you're like, well, we just want to be good, and you got to go for it because you have to rethink things dramatically. It's a big tier. Clippers, Wolves, Pacers, Magic, Sixers, Mavericks. That's the tier for me.
All right. The team I'm least confident in, can you guess it?
Pacers?
Sixers.
So here's the Sixers thing, okay?
I think they're in the right tier for the record, but they're the one that I'm shakiest on.
The Sixers have a chance, but they got to do, it's not, the fans have to accept that the process was disappointing, but what came after was awesome. And so the process was worth it. And that's a very Philly fan thing to do. You trade Embiid, you trade Paul George, you build around Tyrese Maxey, you go the whole way to reconfigure a really, really, really good team with a guy who everyone thought was like pretty good and turned out to be amazing. You gamble big time because you take assured greatness that can never get it together for a team that nobody thought was that great, but it turned out they were, and they are the type of team you want to root for. The Sixers badly. A bunch of teams need this. They need the type of team that their fans want to root for. So for me, the Clippers are the exact same formula here. It's, you don't try and shoot the moon with Kawhi and James Harden. You trade those guys. And what you build with that puts you in a whole other level that was better than what you thought before. There's just like, to me, there is an experience of, we thought it was going to be one thing, but it turns out it was another. And that's like the lesson here. So I think you got to get way outside the box. For if you're the Sixers or you're the Clippers, you have to get outside the box to reconfigure things. The Mavericks here are kind of stuck on the end. And the reason is, for me, it's like, I can't put the Mavericks any lower than tier 4. Because if you ask me, are they going to make a conference finals in the next 2 years? I'd be like, man, there's probably like a 40 to 50% chance here.
Yeah.
Because I hate how Houston, Memphis, and OKC match up with them with AD. I'm a monster AD critic. Some would say a hater. And I still am like, he's going to, like, I was talking to somebody last night and I was just like, iHeart is awesome. Isaiah Hartenstein is so great and he does so many things. He can't guard AD. Chet Holmgren's amazing. He's going to be one of the best defenders this league has ever seen. He can't guard AD. Like, he's going to eat through those guys. And yeah, they don't have enough scoring. You're right. But it's going to be an absolute grinded out 88, 87 game. And they got some dudes that I think can deliver. So the Mavericks are kind of stuck on here. But for me, like, you're right that the Sixers, it seems crazy. The Sixers seem like they're just light years away from contending for a title. But if you offer up Joel Embiid, some team is going to be like, we could do it. We just got to get him healthy for 3 months. We could do it. And what you get from that trade could set you up.
What's the best player that the Sixers can get for Joel Embiid? And I'm not expecting you to go through the entire list of players and give me a name here, but it's like, even just you go down centers, like Memphis would not trade Jaren Jackson Jr. for Joel Embiid. I don't think the Heat would trade Bam for Joel Embiid. I don't think Oklahoma City trades Chet Holmgren for Embiid. Like, you keep kind of going down that list. Like, I don't know. Would Indiana trade Miles Turner for Joel Embiid? Maybe that's just more of the contract thing. But
would Houston trade Alperen Sengun for Joel Embiid?
No, I don't think they do. Right?
I think they do.
Really? Is that just because they want to take a swing?
I think the thing is that Ime Udoka is such a leading force on that team. Like, he has so much weight and authority. And I think the only guy that Ime is 100%, I think he likes his guys and he's got their back. I just think that the only guy that he is like, this is the guy, because he has my kind of mindset, is Amon. I think that's it.
And Fred VanVleet, evidently, but maybe you're right. I wouldn't. I'm like, would you trade? I mean, is it Brandon Ingram?
If you're the Knicks, would you trade Karl Anthony Towns for Embiid?
No.
Really?
No way.
I think the Knicks might.
The Knicks might. I wouldn't. It's
Right.
just so I guess it doesn't matter what I would do. I don't know. Like, he's available, and that's the biggest thing with Embiid. It's what we're gonna know when he comes back eventually and plays a sustained amount of games. I guess his trade value has never been lower than it is now. Yeah. So maybe there's an argument to be made that I'll just get higher. I don't mind the Clippers being here. I never bet on the Clippers. I will never. I've got a saying here that I will never believe in the Clippers. They've burned me too many times. I will never believe in a Kawhi Leonard-led Clippers team, even until the point where they're hoisting the Larry O'Brien trophy. Until the thing is in the record books, I'm not going to believe that they are a championship contender because I've been burnt too many times by them. But Anthony Edwards with the Wolves, all of this makes sense. The Magic, it just feels like they're one piece away from making a run at a conference finals and maybe a finals. So no problems here. I think the Warriors are more of this group for the record in tier 4, but give me tier 5.
Heat, Suns, Hawks, and Pistons.
Heat, Suns, Hawks, Pistons. So this is a bet on the Pistons just being good.
Yep.
And Cade Cunningham. The Hawks with some young players being good.
Yep.
And the Heat just always finding a way to figure things out and making runs in the playoffs.
Oh, no, it's if the Heat actually deal with reality and actually start doing what they need to do and trade Bam Adebayo and everybody else. Like, it's just time to restart this thing entirely all over. It's time. Like, reshape your roster. Figure out a new strong construct. Your whole thing is Heat culture. You got the best coach in basketball. Quit trying to make fetch happen. You got Tyler Hero having an all-star year. Amazing. I have so much respect for Tyler. For him to have gone through the trade rumors and all the crap and all the criticism and everything else and come out with this season, I have so much respect for Tyler Hero. He needs to be most improved player. He needs to be most improved player this season. You should trade him absolutely right now. They should trade him tomorrow. They should trade him tomorrow. They should trade Bam Adebayo tomorrow. Like, use Bam Adebayo as a sweetener for the Jimmy Butler deal and then start all over, and you can rebuild really quickly. Like, that's the thing with the Heat is, like, why don't you do a hyper accelerated time lapse process? You swap out everybody, take on all of the assets, and then you move those. Like, then you turn around and move those for the next time that a guy goes in. Build it immediately. Be like, we're going to build a contender in a summer. I have more faith in the Heat to do that than any other franchise in the NBA. They're the only team I think that could do that. They could build a team overnight to do that. They did it. They did it with Dwayne Wade and then LeBron and those guys. They completely cleared the decks except for Udonis and Dwayne and just rebuilt a contender immediately. That's what they need to do. So to me, like, that's like where this gets to. Suns, same deal. Trade Kevin Durant, trade Devin Booker, start completely all over, bring in new guys that are going to bring you the kind of excitement that you want. Try and get one of these guys that's really young, exciting, and is on that, again, that people are behind the curve on. Get there and then go in that type of direction. I think that there's a capacity there. The Pistons are very much like a Cade's it. Cade's the guy. They got the guy. They got a good supporting core. They are just like a few moves away, and with enough development from Cade over the next 3 years for them to be in that kind of position. The Hawks, though, are similar to, I think, these other teams. Give up the ghost, man. Go trade Trae Young. Go trade Trae Young and build around Jalen Johnson, Dyson Daniels, DeAndre Hunter, and Zachary Risachet. Go do that. And you really do have the capacity, I think, to add players that can put you in position to where you're that good. Quinn Snyder's a great coach. These teams have the potential, but they got to give up the ghost on what they think are these franchise icons. They're not. They're just guys.
Part of me wants to move Detroit up because at least they have it. Like, your argument. So I think they do, like, qualitatively belong on this tier, but your reasoning about, like, hey, these are the teams that should blow it up, but, like, the Pistons have their guy and they might just get better. Like, maybe they're a tier by themselves, like, in between that one and this one, because it just feels like they need to add as opposed to subtract.
So I think it's about a youth thing, right? It's about the timeline. Can Ja be the best? Can Jaren or Ja be the best player in the final series? Not that they're the best player going in, but, like, wow, we got to the end of it, and Jaren Jackson was the best player in that series. Yeah, he's good enough. Do you think that Cade Cunningham going up against any team they face in the Western Conference could be the best player in a final series? I love Cade. I love him.
Not now, but 3 years from now,
maybe. But, like, that thing is, like, it would be at the end of those 3 years. You'd be like, maybe Cade.
That's what I'm saying. Maybe we just get a Pistons tier.
Yeah, maybe that's a better move. The
Yeah.
other thing here is just like, look, they're 20th in offense and they're 14th in defense.
I know, and they're not that
Like,
talented outside of Cade.
This team is 500, but they're not like they are punching above their weight right now. And
Yeah.
I love it because I love watching them. And I had a huge overbet on their win total. Like, I love Detroit, but I'm also just like, well, they're not this good. And so
Yeah.
that's why I think they're here.
The Heat should not trade Bam. I can't let you say that. I had to kind of make sure I said that.
Man, how old's Bam now?
27. He's the guy. The problem is he's the guy that the Stars want to play with.
Right. So go send him somewhere where they have stars.
No, you keep him so you get another star. But the Tyler Hero part of it is interesting. I love Tyler. I have a great relationship with Tyler Hero. I would want to know what they could get for. I would not want to know. I'll be curious to know if they were ever to do it, what the return would be on Tyler Hero. That would just be something that would be curious to me. At this point, if
you offered here's a good question. If you offered OKC, Bam, and Tyler Hero, what do you think they're willing to give you?
Well, I've kind of framed this from the other side is how many firsts until Miami says no, or until Miami says yes.
Yeah,
it's 2 firsts for Tyler Hero. I think Miami would say no. 3 firsts for Tyler Hero. I think they would. I'm just telling you. I think they would say no to 2 first-round picks for Tyler Hero. If it's just like Tyler Hero in contracts, if it's like Tyler Hero and like Isaiah Joe or whatever, 3 first-round picks, they have to have a meeting about it.
This finals era for them, making 2 finals, which were not real, is the worst thing that could ever happen to a franchise. I have so much respect for, because they just like, you guys are they're so high on their own supply.
I agree. They should have traded Jimmy 2 years ago.
They used to be so cold-blooded and rational.
Yep. And then Tyler Johnson ruined all of it. They gave him $20 million a year, and they just and ever since then.
There's a name, man. Tyler. Whoa.
Are those the end of your tiers? Did you do all the teams?
I have one more that we can do, and then there's kind of everybody else. The tier below them is Blazers, Hornets, and Raptors, because I think that you need to be like, Portland, I think, is showing a little bit that there's like components there. Now, I don't think Anthony Simons is the guy. They don't have the guy. I think the Hornets, on the other hand, the Luka trade is proof that Charlotte needs. I used to be like, you should just trade Luka or trade LaMelo. He's not a winning player.
Mm-hmm.
I've moved where I'm like, keep trying, man.
Yeah.
Like, maybe he'll get it. Keep trying until you know that he's never going to get it, until he's 30. And it's just like, yeah, he never got it. And then it's just like, at least you can be like, we had a transcendent talent and he never got it. And that wasn't on us. We believed in a guy. It's better to believe in a guy, and I think, and be wrong, than to give up on him too early. And that's hard for me, because I always think you should give up on guys, because I'm just like, a lot of these guys are not about the right things. And I don't love the way that LaMelo has played this year, but the fact that he's able to put the production in, and the fact that he is such a good passer, it's like, if you just chop off 15% of his bad stuff, you're in such a great spot with him. And they do have Brandon Miller, and they do have, I think, some stuff there. And if you dig real deep, you have to go real deep into the statistical weeds. There's like a lot of stuff with Charlotte that you wind up coming out and being like, Charles Lee's probably doing the right, like, he's making strides here.
Yeah.
Like, they're going in the right direction.
In terms of like the clockmaker part of it, you're like, okay, yeah, I can see it.
Yeah. Like, it's, and on the surface, it's all nasty, but you can kind of get there. So with Portland, I think it's just more a matter of, I'm just like, if you guys will give up the ghost and just do the deals you need to do, and stop winning 8 of 9 with Cooper Flags sitting there, then they could be in a position, I think, to really turn this around quickly. I think the organization,
because Portland at least has, like, they have interesting players. Like, you watch a Trailblazers game, you're like, I like that guy, I like that guy, I like that guy. And it's just like, they don't fit even a little bit. And you gotta, I think Chauncey Billups is actually a pretty good coach. And you just kind of move some of these things around and figure it out. I'm with you, but like, it would take Cronin kind of pulling the trigger on some of these things and realizing that nobody wants Jeremy Grant, dude. It's okay. Just trade him. It's fine.
Toronto is to me the same deal, where it's like, I think Scotty Barnes' best games are amazing and his worst games are awful. He's probably, I think, a number 2 versus a number 1, and that's a big gap that you got to kind of overcome. But you do have, I think, RJ Barrett can be like a number 4. And so, like, you can do a lot of stuff with that roster to me, reshape it in interesting ways. But again, Masai's going to have to give up on, no, we're going to have Jakob Poeltl and Kelly Olynyk, and we're not trading them. What are you doing, and like trade RJ Barrett, move up. Like, I like the fact that they're kicking the tires on Brandon Ingram. I like the fact that they're kicking the tires. Like, I've wondered, this is entirely speculative, not reported. I've wondered if the conversations with New Orleans about Brandon Ingram are smokescreen for them to be like, okay, so we probably can't do this for Brandon Ingram, but if you guys want to talk Zion, we have the same stuff available.
Right.
That to me makes a ton of sense. And if you got Zion, and it's like, how would you play Zion and Scotty Barnes? They're both big forwards that need the ball in their hands. And I'm like, I don't know, man, figure it out. Scotty at 3, Zion at 4, and a stretch 5, go to work. But that's like so much talent if Zion is able to get his weight under control. So those are kind of ideas. And that to me is really kind of the end of like the teams I think that are worth.
Yeah, I mean, the one team you didn't include, unless I missed it, was New Orleans. Did you have them?
No, I've got them in the tier below. It's Bulls, Pelicans, Jazz, Wizards. I'm missing one more.
I would bump just because the Pelicans, Trey Murphy might be he might be a guy here.
Yeah.
And they still have Zion under contract. And maybe there's a year where they just sort of, like, when Zion's right, he's one of the best 10 offensive players in the league. And if he's just right for a playoff stretch, that it would just be a bet 1 out of these next 3 that you get a healthy Zion for a playoff stretch. And Trey Murphy's this guy. There's a lot of depth there if they get healthy.
I like David Griffin in terms of like the way he thinks about things, the way that he's talked about thinking about things. I just don't have any sort of proof that there's a supporting structure in New Orleans from a organizational standpoint for them to be aggressive enough. Like,
okay, but you got to move them into like worse than Portland and Charlotte. Come on.
So here's the thing. I think Portland is probably going to have a coaching change this summer.
Okay.
And so if you look at it from an assets plus a new direction, like these other teams are going to, how do I have any proof that New Orleans is going to look any different this summer? They've done this over and over and over and over and over and over and over again.
So that's Portland, why the Bulls tier.
Portland, it's inevitable. Like they will be different, right? And they've probably hit rock bottom and are bouncing back up right now. I don't think this is dead cat. I think that the Pistons did this last year. They lost 28 in a row, but by the end of the year, that's why I was all in on this year. I was like, they hit rock bottom, but then they climbed out of it together. And Portland, I think, is climbing out of it. But with New Orleans, Trey Murphy was amazing last night. They had no shot in that game versus Denver. Trey Murphy was amazing last night. They had no shot. Zion played, no shot. Nothing they could do.
Yeah, you might be right.
Yeah. I hate it for them because New Orleans is the best city in the world. But
was that sarcastic?
No, I'm serious. I love New Orleans.
I love New Orleans too. Yeah, I was like, no Bam Adebayo, no New Orleans, no Tyler Johnson slander on RealGM Radio these days. Matt Moore, find him at the Action Network, the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe to the Substack, Hardwood Paroxysm. You obviously already follow him on Twitter. Matt, thanks so much, man. This was fun.
Hey, thanks for having me.